just give it to us today. Mr. Hermanson was a very good man, very active with the VFW overachieving. All right, public comments. Anyone here this morning for public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Weiniger from Williston. I left each of you a flyer. Williston is having an emergency preparedness seminar this Saturday. That's the one. From 10 until noon in Williston at the LDS Chapel, which is on the split as you go either to Archer or to Gainesville. It's right there on the west side. We have Steve Severance will be there, John McDonald, David Payton, Clay Connolly, and I don't think Lamar's coming. I think that it's going to be Danny Wallace. But everyone is invited. This is timely for especially hurricane season, but anytime. Just wanted to invite everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else this morning for public comment? All right, first order of business will be Mr. Beckley.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
And I apologize for loading up the agenda. I'll try to quickly go through it. Yes, thank you. I'll pay it down like Rotary for a fine. First off, I want to start with the request for approval to adopt ordinance 2016-03 for the repealing of the resolution creating the Levy County Development Authority. A very, very brief history. This goes back to '85. The LCDA was formed for the purposes, obviously, of economic development. Over the time, it transitions to what we now have, which is the Nature Coast Business Development Council. The attraction back then was one of the components was the bonding authority, and over time, well before I got here, actually before I even got out of junior high school, I think things kind of slowed down, and the bonding really was never up until I think maybe 2008 was really never tapped into. From that point forward, the board's been inactive for several years, maybe 2-3 years even before I got here, which would be 2011 is when I got here. So it really hasn't been any activity. The board could meet independent, but hasn't. Now that the Business Development Council is doing its thing, we just looked at it as, you know, an extra bookkeeping thing that maybe isn't necessary, especially when you've got other options when it comes to funding. You know, bonds, that's kind of less desirable, and even if we were to want to exercise that, there's other avenues we could tap into for bonds. And so at this point, we just look at it as a simple changing of the guard, I guess, if you will. And never, as Ann might want to explain, I mean, it's not like it completely goes away because it was created by, you know, a state, statute, but it basically puts it on hiatus, I guess.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Beckley? Not this time. All right.
Chair, we need to read the title of the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Ordinance number 2016-03, an ordinance of Levy County, Florida, repealing the resolution and vote creating the Levy County Industrial Development Authority, providing for Nature Coast Business Development Council, Inc. as the economic development agency to coordinate economic development activities in the public and private sectors, providing for conflict, providing for exclusion from codification, providing for severability, and providing effectiveness.
This is a public hearing, so we will go row by row to hear citizen comment. Anybody, if you're going to speak, please raise your hand to be sworn in. Nope, not sworn in. All right. Row 1. Row 2. Row 3. Row 4. Back wall. Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. What's the pleasure of the board? We have a motion to approve from Mr. Brooks. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion from Mr. Brooks, second from Commissioner Joyner. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, on to the progress report. This would be covering the last couple months. There was recently a report issued by an economic analysis group connected to a university. Basically, where it stands right now is that rural communities, less than 100,000 or less residents, I should say, are accounting for 1 out of every 10 jobs created. And this has been a continuing trend over the last decade where jobs have moved back to urban areas, and you know that's where the investment is and so forth. So obviously we know there's always challenges that we're faced in rural communities, but you know, it's not one of those things where you put up the white flag and say, well, what's the point? You obviously find what you can work on, what your strong suits are, and obviously grow from the inside out. And so that's what we've been seeing over the last several years is working on the business retention expansion component. And we've been seeing a lot of successes. There's been a lot of the new guys as well. Obviously, you know, we've heard about recently the nuclear plant, of course, the hospital at Chiefland. So you've got a lot of that going on, but there's several new projects that are expansion based. I'm working with 2 that are in Williston that within the next 2 years, they're looking to expand, one of which would be an expansion and a completely new business venture that they've seen as a need in the community. So there's a lot of good signs. All these are creating jobs. All these are obviously, bringing economic investment into the communities. So, you know, those are great, obviously, pieces of news. One thing that we are working on as well is we're working with the Florida Northern Railroad because, of course, the short line goes through that is leased by CSX, or leased from CSX, excuse me. The shoreline goes through Williston, so one of the things we've been working with is increasing rail traffic, because right now, basically, the only traffic you have is coal going from Newberry down to the new plant in Crystal River. That's going to stop in about 5 years, not even. I'm not in a position, we as the Business Development Council aren't in a position, yes, go ahead.
You said the coal's gonna stop going to Crystal River?
In about 5 years. About 5 years, that's the expected, yes, time frame. So, of course, they're bringing on a natural gas plant, and we're still obviously not, set in stone as to what's going to happen at the Inglis site. So we have to basically be proactive. We have to, plan ahead. We can't just wait for the 5 years to come and say, okay, well, what do we do, abandon the rail? So what we're looking at is increasing rail traffic, because there really is no local users other than that coal. So what I've been doing is been working with a rail company, Florida Northern again. We have a company that needs help at the transloading facility, which is the area in Williston where you pull up your trucks, you unload the freight then goes on to its destination. We have identified several companies that could assist this company. It's an aggregate material that they would be unloading. And so again, that's another example of where you create jobs internally, because now you've gotten a contract that can be, inked between these two groups, and obviously you're fulfilling a service that might not have been realized before. You might have had a company that said, okay, well, there's other rail loading places elsewhere, maybe we should go there. We're keeping it in-house. So again, another good thing, it's growing from the inside out, and it's something that might spur more investment or offshoots, I guess, if you will, down the road. And lastly, we are working on a business alliance. This would be tied into what the chambers currently do. Obviously, business, not just expansion, but obviously promoting what the local businesses do, the products that are produced. We're creating this probably in the next 2 to 3 months. We're working with things like what was Mr. Mott's Mid-Florida Regional Manufacturers Association out of Ocala. They serve this county and 4 others, going all the way down to Sumter. So this is one of those things that connects these dots better. We better promote our businesses from within. We have a networking opportunity where businesses can kind of put a face to a name, where they've got a better awareness of what their neighbors are doing, what they're producing, and maybe they'll realize that there's services that they're currently outsourcing to other communities that they can do here, because there's a business right down the street from them doing that same thing. So again, this is one of those things that we want to have a better connectivity and people working with each other, ourselves, our family, our friends, as opposed to going out of the county for it. I mean, you've got businesses here that are going to Georgia for services, and certainly they're one of our biggest competitors. So anything we can do to reverse that trend is all the better. With that, said, I don't want to take up more time than I have to on the progress report, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
David, what's the word on the hospital in Chiefland?
It's, as you've seen, it's still moving forward. There's been some comments and whatnot that it was dead, this and that, but it's still obviously very viable. I've been in contact with certain groups. You've got 2 sides. You've got the administrative side and you've got the funding side. And I know that there were issues with a grant and so forth in the past, but things are still moving forward. And the plans are that it's still going to, and relatively soon, work is going to start on constructing the facility. So I know I've said before, it's perception. There's sometimes that perception that, well, it's been going on for 10 plus years, what are the odds this time? But again, all I can say is that everything I'm being told is that it's still very viable and it's still moving ahead.
Ms. Cannon.
Mr. Chairman, what, according to the chief and citizens, the con application, the extension for the certificate of need was denied by the state agency.
Mhm.
What, is that still so? Is
They
that
can
correct?
certainly reapply, which is what the anticipation would be. You know, I know it would be another delay and it would be another setback, but again, I'm only going off of what I'm, being told. Now, what's going on internally, what's going on behind the scenes, that's a whole other, situation, obviously, but that is what I'm being told.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Weiner.
I'm wondering what that means to the hospital in Williston, with the hospital in Chiefland. Will they both be able to survive?
I don't get into business of speculation. Obviously, the Williston Hospital has had quite a lot of turnover from an administrative standpoint. There's obviously been some hearings here as well. I can just simply say that they have obviously been taking steps. The current administration has certainly been taking steps to plug some gaps, to obviously increase services, work on their ER, being a primary, instead of having people going out of town and not realizing the benefits that they have at this facility. They're trying to do a lot of the PR side of it, public relations. Look, we offer these services. You don't necessarily have to go to Gainesville. You don't have to go to Ocala. And so that's the biggest thing. But again, I know that that's one of those things that the community can kind of be a little leery or a little skeptical. Okay, well, we've been seeing this thing struggling for quite some time.
Mr. Hardison.
Have you communicated with the Wilson Hospital about its intent to expand into Chiefland?
And I didn't want to get into that, but certainly that is what, I guess would go along with what you were saying, is that was one of the plans, is to obviously work on, and the two would obviously separate, you'd have to operate them as separate entities, but.
If one came to be and one didn't, then I think it would just be.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have that crystal ball that we always are desperately looking for, so. And that's a lot of times it's that finish line. You're dealing with one company and they're giving you all the right answers, and all of a sudden somebody else comes out of the blue and kind of takes the ball and runs with it. So you never know. And that's why I know that sometimes I have to be kind of guarded with certain things, because there's confidentiality and you don't want to obviously burn bridges and everything. This is one of those things that, listen, I don't sugarcoat. I certainly, with some of the comments that have been said in the same room, hey, I full-heartedly agree. Certainly, if you're a longtime resident and you've been wanting something for the longest time, and every single time it seems like you're at that finish line, all of a sudden the wheel falls off and you're a foot away from that finish line, yeah, you're going to get upset. You're going to get jaded, but all we can do is just hope for the best, and if this doesn't work, I can guarantee you something will take its place.
Thank you. Any questions about the progress report?
Okay, the last thing is, the last item on the agenda is an incentive app question. We, of course, this goes back to about a year or two, where we finalized the, what was called the Economic Development Fund Business Incentive Program. This was done for the local flavor, where we had more control over the smaller businesses, which of course is the predominant makeup of our economy. We had an application recently submitted, and this was based on conversations that I had with county staff. It was a retailer in Chiefland. Confidentiality has been requested, so I cannot at this point, apologize. At this point, I can't tell you the name, but I can certainly tell you that it is a long-time business. They have been in the community for about 20 plus years. They were looking to do a remodeling. They're going to do a prototype store that they've done across the nation elsewhere. And you're talking new jobs and a significant improvement on the current location. Where we're at right now is we've worked out who from your side, so to speak, is going to help assist with the scoring, with the grading of these applications. Ms. Shelley and her assistant Franklin, I met with about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Both were very helpful. They suggested some improvements to the application guide to make it more streamlined and easier to understand as a business that might not have had to do this before. Very good insight. One thing, this particular application that was submitted, it's a different sort of scenario that we've anticipated, which is the business through a triple net lease pays the property taxes. So the way I look at it, it's no different than a business owner. They own the property, they have a building erected, they're paying the ad valorem taxes. I don't see it being any differently, but certainly it's not spelled out in the application. So that was one of those things that before I went any further, I wanted your direction, your input as to how would you like me to handle this. And before that, to give you really quick, the reason why this application has been submitted, because I know it's retail, and I know that we talked about a while back that that's not targeted per se, but we do have the option on a case by case to look at things. We looked at this as, listen, we've had this this program for about 2 years. Of course, we have the other, which is the economic development ad valorem tax exemptions, which is the more of the state controlled program. Until we get a business or two to go through this, there's those processes that you need to work out, and there's also the success stories that you want to use as the marketing that, hey, listen, this company just got awarded X amount going through this program, have their nice little picture in the papers or whatever. This was one of those low-hanging fruits where you're not talking a $15, $20 million project where there's going to be a big loss to the county initially to reimburse. This is a small, basically, what can y'all do to help us out? A facade improvement grant, something along those lines. So we looked at this as, this would be a good test run to see how this process works, and it worked exactly as planned. We've got a situation that we didn't necessarily factor in because we've never been, down this road before. So we put something together we thought worked, but now we've got one of those, okay, this is a gray area. It's a triple net lease. It's not an ownership, but they're still paying those taxes. So how do you want to handle that? Oh, thank you.
They're paying the taxes.
That's the way I look at it. But again,
whether they own the property or not, it still would be a incentive to their business to help their bottom line to make them more successful. The way I see it.
yeah, 'cause originally we thought it was tangible, which we've got the agricultural. I guess I should just give up. It was tangible was for agricultural. In this case, it's like, okay, well, we could, do a similar approach for this. But then when I did some more digging and I reached out to the company that represents the actual applicant, the triple net lease was discussed. So it kind of made it a moot point where, to me, brings it back to it's no different than that owner coming in. So, but I just want to make sure I did not want to go any further until I knew for a fact that y'all were comfortable with that. And we certainly, from a housekeeping standpoint, we will certainly revise some of those areas in the application where maybe we could make it a little bit more clear what the applicant is supposed to do or how they can process the application better.
David, we started this process and got this ordinance on the syntax narrative to get more businesses in the county, and the business is already in the county. Just expanding or remodeling.
In particular, this incentive for this, yeah.
This is part of the same thing we're doing now.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And it's gonna create more jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and the business is gonna get bigger. It's gonna keep growing. It's just like any other thing we got. I know we need new business in the county, but we absolutely, in my account, have to support the ones we have here already.
Absolutely.
And keep them in business.
Absolutely.
So whatever you have to do to get them to expand, to put more people to work, and keep them home, I'm for it.
There you go. That's exactly why we created that second incentive, was for these moments. So.
Now, did you review their application where they self-scored?
Yes, sir. And actually, it hasn't been submitted in that packet because I figured I didn't want to put the cart before the horse, but planning has reviewed it as well, and they agreed with what I came up with.
You agree with the numbers?
Yes, sir. Yep. From memory, it was 75, and so that puts them at the highest tier for the EDF, which would be 85% of the increment.
David, how many incentive applications have been picked up since we started this a couple of years ago? Do you know?
2, but it's a little misleading because there's actually been a lot more that have been submitted that are pending And that, one of the businesses that I referenced a few minutes ago, you know, one of the expansions, that will be one of those applications that ultimately will be receiving. But this is really the first one that's gotten to this point.
So it has created interest.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and one thing that I recently did is I created a trifold for us, for the organization, and that was one of those marketing efforts where went around and educated some of these businesses that, listen, we've got this program, just as kind of a refresher, and that spurred about 5 or 6, you know, future applicants. So,
Okay.
yeah, we're seeing a return.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion, we, how do I put this? I make a motion, we pass that presented by David to,
Move forward.
how you want me to put this?
You want us to move forward with the application
I
process?
want to move forward with the application
Okay.
process to help this building expand
Okay.
and stay in the county, yes.
All right.
So with that said, Miss Ann, I would imagine we would need to have a separate hearing then to evaluate or,
I remember, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember how we set it up. I think we have to come back with an actual ordinance and an agreement.
correct, for that specific.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, so once we, and then we'll also talk to Mr. Frey about budgeting money,
you got it.
find out how much of the money can be budgeted.
Yep.
Okay, now, I'll say it the right way. I make a motion, we go forward, David, with the application to proceed with the application as presented.
Yeah.
Your second still stands. We have a motion by Commissioner Joyner, a second by Commissioner Brooks. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Mr. Menace.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Steve Menace, Swanee River Water Management District. This is one of the fun things about my position. I get to hand over the payment of lieu taxes checks to my small communities. Payment in lieu of taxes, or PILT for short, for the audience, is a mechanism that the state has created to reimburse the local governments that meet that criteria of 150,000 or less population, and giving the ad valorem taxes back to the county. So when the Water Management District purchases a piece of property, it will pay those taxes. Now, the Swanee River Water Management District owns about 6,950 acres in the county, and we have conservation easements, or what we call less than fee simple ownership on about 43,460 acres. Now, those landowners still pay those taxes, so the Water Management District does not. But I also want to recognize this board for its support in the past for getting the payment in lieu of taxes appropriated, that funding appropriated in the legislative budget process. As you recall, a couple years ago, the legislature did away with those appropriations to the Swanee River Water Management District. Well, that was not sustainable for us, but the board did agree to go ahead and make those payments out of our reserves, and so that was done. And with this board, as well as our other small communities, as well as this legislative delegation, Representative Stone and Senator Dean, were very instrumental in making sure that money was put back into the budget. So I want to recognize them as well as this board. Also, I want to recognize your staff. It's always been a pleasure working with them. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to, if I may approach the
Yes,
chair.
sir.
I hand you a check for
As long as you ain't got a gun.
$30,401.84. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But it's made out to the Board of County Commissioners again. When do we get it made out to John? Thank you, sir. All right. Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Got some paperwork here.
Thank you.
You're good. Rob Davis, Dewberry Publish, County Engineer. This is regarding University Oaks water system improvements. Just an update, the contractor is out there this morning completing the service connections. He's got 8 or 9 more to go. All the water main is installed. Pressure test was passed, bacteriological testing was passed, and so I've got several items here to go over to try and leverage the remaining funding in our river grant. On the first submittal, if you look at the 5th page, kind of gives a breakout of where we're at with the money. Swanee River Water Management District funded this project under river grant, and we received $151,390. Then part of that, we have the engineering cost and the survey consultant. So when that was taken out, you can see the balance on the right-hand side of your sheet. So we were left with around $125,000 after the design and permitting and survey was taken care of. The contract was awarded to Carter Excavating out of Bell, Florida. They're using a local plumber here in Bronson as a sub-consultant. And so that left us with just under $12,300 remaining on the grant funding. When we went out and started breaking ground and looking to install the water main by the plant, we found a section of 6-inch line that we didn't realize was there. So what that meant was there's about 353 linear foot of water main that was not needed to be installed. So that is reflected in change order 1, which is a credit of $1,868. So now, with the amount that the contract came in under budget, the credit for change order 1, we're looking at just over $14,000 remaining in the grant fund. So, in order to leverage this funding and create another looped water main and abandon a leaking, dilapidated water main that has unmetered, unauthorized connections, we were looking at providing a change order number 2 for the contractor. The contractor has agreed to the change order. We've used the bid unit prices that were negotiated under the original contract. And so that total, to complete this looped water main, to provide 11 more service connections, and to remove and abandon the old leaking, dilapidated water main, that change order will come to $67,422. Taking away the $14,000 that is remaining in the grant funding, that puts the funds that we're asking for on behalf of the Department of Public Works at $53,257.67. This contractor has done a really good job. We're lucky to have him on board. If you recall, the residences out there currently are being fed from the rear. And now we're putting the water main in the front, make it easier to access for city staff, making sure that nobody goes out there and just pulls out a meter and starts making their own connections so they can fill up swimming pools, provide for irrigation. And we knew it was going to be challenging by changing the services from the back to the front. And, you know, again, he's got a local plumber here in Bronson, and we're really lucky to have him on board. They're really doing a bang-up job.
Jimmy, you come to the podium, please.
Good morning. Thank you.
Just an estimate, how much money, how much water are we losing a year at University numbers go, because we're pumping that we're not getting billed for?
I'm not prepared to actually
Well,
answer
just
that
a
with
rough
exact
estimate,
numbers.
buddy,
I would say, quite a bit. I know Swanee River Management's here. With that being said, every year we can't account for a certain amount. We're pumping more than we're selling, for example. And I would, of course, put that at probably millions of gallons
So,
of pumping that we're not receiving funding for.
at the end of the day, I'm not.
That's leaks, that's illegal taps, that's stuff that we've actually been able to acquire throughout the years, and we're trying to identify this as we move along.
Yes, sir. And we've talked about it in the past, I know it's a lot, I'm just trying to educate the public.
Right.
So, in reality, we're looking at a pretty big number here, but, we're probably throwing that much money away in water that we're pumping and not selling every 2 years, 3 years.
I would be
Maybe
comfortable,
every
I would
year.
be comfortable to say probably a year, we could probably recoup that money. And just to kind of go back on with Pebble Rish and Dewberry now, and the contractor, Carter Excavating, they've been doing a jam-up job that we've been able to do. They've been wonderful to work with, and as you can see, most jobs run over, these actually run under. I think that's good for the county, that's good for the community, as you look at it. Normally they'll come back and say they need more money. They're actually giving us an added deal there, so I think that's kudos to them doing a good job. It's kudos to the contractor, and even though we've got some unforeseen stuff that happens out there, we're identifying stuff as we go, because there's stuff in the ground that we acquired before we actually took over the system, so nobody knows until we actually run into it.
It is a challenge, and I appreciate what y'all do. I just wanted to get, you being the director over the water works there, so that the board was aware of how much water we're losing, how this is going to improve upon that. We're gonna actually be able to collect.
And kind of it, in a nutshell, kind of quick, is we're at the backs of people's property. We have an easement back there. There's a pipe running in the back. There's fences, there's different stuff. There's issues that Ms. Brown is aware of that we have currently. We're moving the pipe to the fronts of the property, which is on the roadway or in our right of way, in the ditch, where we can actually get to the pipes. For one, now we're getting people that are saying, hey, we are on the system, we didn't know, whatever, so we're recouping, we're adding people onto the system.
We just have
by
magic
doing this.
water in our house, because we don't have a well, but every time we turn on the faucet, water comes out.
I didn't know that I was getting water for free.
We
The
didn't have-
realtor told me, it's part of the deal.
That's part of the package.
So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
I agree.
There is some stuff that we're gonna have to go with coming out on 24. That's where the line's gonna run, but I think they've already identified some good opportunities that DOT's allowing us to do some stuff. If this in fact does take off, I think it's gonna be a win-win for the county for the future. And this is a good phase as far as to be able to knock it out while the contractor's still in the area.
Save mobilization costs.
Mobilization costs, and there's a lot of stuff that on the backside that would save us money.
Talking to Miss Sheila, we do have the funding available to do this, so. Alright. Any more questions for Jimmy or for Rob?
And this water system that we're dealing with is a water system we inherited.
Correct.
So
Yes, sir.
everybody in the public knows that. It's not,
It was abandoned.
it was an abandoned water system that
And as the county's been moving forward, we've been identifying and putting stuff on paper that we don't have. So some of this unforeseen stuff is because they didn't hand us all the documentation we didn't know. But
So, you said water lines running in people's backyard, so naturally whenever a water main busts, you have to go fix it in their
in the
backyard.
backyard, which is in fact trying to get equipment in there and big equipment and
And
every
those,
stuff is a challenge.
those knowing firsthand, those properties have changed hands multiple times, and sometimes whenever deeds are recorded, they're not recorded properly with easement. People have,
Right.
they think they own all this and they fence it, so now they're having to go through people's fences, go through people's yards. People plant trees and hedges and
Right.
they don't like it when they're put down.
Exactly.
Bad dogs.
Right.
And sometimes they even bathe.
So, after this phase is over, correct me on, because my memory has slipped, how many new connections will we have made on this first
I think right now, and Rob can correct me if I'm
You're on
wrong,
11.
we're between 17 and 20 roughly right now that we've identified on the first thing that we've done already, which as we speak, there's one or two new housing that I guess they're doing now, so they're gonna get on the system. They're seeing, you know, it's kind of, like I said, we're probably gonna be sitting around 21 people once this thing gets put in on the first one. This new one, if we do in fact do this other one, I think it's pretty close to around the same numbers.
It'll be, the first phase has 17 actual connections and then 7 stub-ups that are to vacant parcels for future connections. And this phase that we're discussing here today, will have 11 new connections, 9 actual connections, and 2 stub-ups to vacant parcels for future connections.
And I went through last week and saw 2 new houses getting put in. So, like I was talking about the 2 stub-ups, those are now have meters. Probably within probably the next month. I've seen new places getting put in there, new driveways and stuff. So those meters will actually have meters, or those stub-ups will have meters. I'm sure shortly they'll be doing funding for that stuff.
Any other questions?
No, I'm ready to make a motion for it.
Got this money right here, we're good.
That's what I have. I help